An 88-year-old woman is on her knees, on a wooden stage, in front of 800 people and every camera in Georgia. Eugenia Tate has not apologized to anyone in 35 years. Now her cane is lying where it fell and nobody moves to pick it up. Because standing over her is the woman she spent 2 decades destroying. The woman she got fired. The woman this whole town called a liar, a fraud, a scheme while she cleaned their houses, sold cornbread through her kitchen window for $5 a pan. And behind that woman stand 3 men in tailored suits who just paid off her entire mortgage before breakfast. The crowd goes silent. Eugenia's voice cracks for the first time in her public life. "Can you forgive me?" Loretta Mae Dawson looks down at her, reaches out her hand, and what she says next brings the entire town of Millhaven to tears. In 2024, 3 black SUVs rolled into Millhaven, Georgia. Slow, deliberate, like they owned the road and knew it. Everybody on Birch Street stepped out onto their porches. Nobody said a word. Because vehicles like that didn't come to Millhaven. Not ever. They cost more than most houses on that street, more than some people earned in 5 years. And they were heading, slow as a funeral procession, toward the smallest house on the block. The one with the tarp on the roof, the one with the garden out front that someone tended like it was holy ground. A woman stood on the porch of that house, 65 years old, gray hair caught in the morning light, a watering hose still dripping in her left hand. Her right hand pressed flat against her chest. She didn't move, couldn't, because she recognized something. Not the cars, not the men stepping out of them. Something in the way they moved, the way the tallest one stopped at the edge of the garden path and just looked at her, like he had been practicing that look for 19 years. We will get back to this moment. We have to. But first, we need to go back, way back, to a Tuesday night in October 2004. To a woman sitting alone in a kitchen with a leaking roof and a prayer she had been praying for 15 years straight, and a phone that was about to ring and change everything. Millhaven, Georgia. Population 2,800. 1 gas station on the corner of Route 9 and Main. 1 Baptist church with a sign out front that Pastor Gideon Marsh changed every Monday morning without fail. 1 grocery store run by Donnie Pruitt, who closed at 6 o'clock on the dot and did not care who was still standing at the register. The kind of town where everybody knew everybody, and everybody had an opinion about everybody else. Loretta Mae Dawson had lived in Millhaven her entire life. 45 years in the same county. The last 23 in the same house, a small white wood frame on Birch Street that her grandmother Dottie Dawson built in 1955 with money she had saved doing laundry for 3 different families across 11 years. Every dollar deliberate, every board chosen, every nail placed with intention. Dottie had been particular about that house. She was particular about everything. The floors were original pine. They creaked in specific places. The 4th board from the bedroom door, the spot just left of the kitchen threshold, the bottom step of the back porch. Loretta knew every one of those creaks the way you know a family member's voice. By sound, by feeling underfoot, by the specific pitch of each one in the dark. The wraparound porch had a rocking chair Dottie had painted blue 3 times over the years. The paint was chipping now. Loretta kept meaning to fix it, but there was always something more urgent than the rocking chair. Out back was the garden, 4 rows of tomatoes, 2 of green beans, collard greens in the far corner that Loretta tended every morning before sunrise because Dottie had asked her to keep it going and Loretta kept her promises, even to people who were no longer there to hold her to them. She worked 2 jobs, mornings in the cafeteria kitchen at Millhaven Elementary, sliding trays in, ladling soup, and calling every child by name because she knew every name without trying. Weekends mopping floors at the county courthouse, 3 floors, 9 bathrooms. The kind of work that doesn't show unless you stop doing it. She brought home $1.280 a month. The mortgage was $620. You do that math and you understand something about Loretta Dawson's right away. She wasn't surviving by accident. She was surviving by discipline and repetition and the kind of daily decision-making that never makes headlines because it doesn't look like heroism from the outside. It looks like getting up again. Just getting up again. The roof had been leaking since February. The repair estimate was $400. Her savings held $780. She'd applied for a county home repair grant 4 months back. The woman at the office said she was in the queue. Loretta bought a blue tarp instead, draped it over the back corner of the living room, placed 3 buckets underneath. When it rained, she moved the buckets. When it stopped, she emptied them. When people at church asked how she was doing, she said fine, because she was, mostly. Above the fireplace hung a small piece of wood, hand-carved, the edges worn smooth from decades of dusting. Dottie had made it herself, 12 words in uneven letters that had been read so many times the paint was almost gone. A house becomes a home when it holds someone else's pain. Loretta had read those words 10,000 times. She still wasn't sure she understood them completely. In the drawer of her nightstand, locked in a small wooden box with a key she kept on her keychain between her house key and her courthouse key, were two documents, both yellowed with age, both certificates for children who never breathed air outside a hospital. One from 1991, one from 1993. She didn't open the box. But she didn't throw it away either. Some things you carry not because they are useful, but because setting them down would feel too much like forgetting, and Loretta Dawson did not forget. She had one close friend in the particular way that matters. Vivian Okafor, 3 houses down on Birch Street. Originally from Lagos, by way of Atlanta, by way of a marriage that brought her to Millhaven and a divorce that kept her here because she had already put down roots and wasn't about to pull them up for a man who didn't deserve the effort. Vivian was direct in the way that only women who have been through real things are direct. She didn't say what she didn't mean, and she didn't siphon what needed to be said. And on Tuesday evenings, when neither of them had anywhere else to be, she came over and they sat on the porch with sweet tea and talked about everything and nothing till the yard went dark. One Tuesday in September 2004, Vivian said it plainly. "Have you ever actually thought about leaving?" Retta rocked the chair. "Leaving where?" "Here, this town. Your cousin Renee has room in Atlanta. You've said so yourself. She does." "And," Loretta smiled, the kind that has tiredness built into it from years of being asked questions without easy answers. "And who's going to watch this garden? Who's going to make sure Donnie Pruitt doesn't let the bread go stale before he marks it down?" Vivian looked at her. Not the words. At her. "That's not a reason to stay, Loretta. It's my reason, which was true. And also not the whole truth." The whole truth was something Loretta had stopped letting herself look at directly, because looking at it directly meant it acknowledging the particular shape of what was missing, a thing she had wanted so long that wanting it had become part of her structure. The way a wall is part of a house. She had dreamed of being a mother her whole had stopped saying that out loud sometime around 1994. But some nights, in the quiet house with the creaking floors, she would lie still and wonder what it would sound like if someone else was breathing nearby. What it would feel like to not be the only person her house was responsible for holding. She prayed the same prayer every night, 15 years of the same prayer. "Lord, if I'm meant to be a mother, send me someone to love. If I'm not, help me make peace with this empty house." She had made peace with it, mostly. The phone rang on a Tuesday evening in October 2004. Loretta was at the kitchen table going over bills. The ceiling in the back corner had started to bow slightly from the tarp weight, and she was trying to decide whether waiting another month on the repair estimate was a financial decision or a dangerous one. She picked up on the second ring. "Loretta." The voice was tight. "Careful. Carla Briggs." Social worker out of the county office. They had known each other since high school, back when Carla was Carla Simmons, and they both sang in the junior choir with more enthusiasm than accuracy. "Carla, I know it's late. I know this is a lot to ask." A pause that had something heavy in it. "I have 3 young men, brothers, and I cannot find placement. I mean nobody. I have called every approved home in the county. 4 homes took them over the past 14 months. All 4 asked for removal." Loretta straightened in her chair. "What happened?" The kind of things that make people stop asking questions and start closing doors. Carla's voice was careful, choosing each word. "I can't get into details. But I will tell you this honestly. These are not bad young men. They are hurt young men. There is a difference." "I know the difference. I know you do." A breath. "If I don't have confirmed placement by Friday, I have to split them up. 3 different group homes, 3 different counties." Loretta looked at the wooden plaque above the fireplace. A house becomes a home when it holds someone else's pain. "Tell me about them," she said, so Carla did. Callan Voss was 17 years old. Oldest, already 6 feet and carrying himself like a man 2 decades past his age, jaw set, hands half-fisted at his sides, eyes that cataloged every room he entered for exits and threats. He had been the one holding things together since age 13, since their parents began falling apart, since the ground beneath the family shifted and nobody else stepped up. By the time his father died on a wet stretch of ice 285 14 months ago, a delivery truck running a red light, no warning, no time, Callan had already been the parent for 4 years. Dex Voss was 16, wiry and fast and furious in a way that had found no clean channel. 3 school suspensions in 14 months, all for fighting. Always defending his brothers. A fading bruise around his left eye from something in the last placement that Carla described as an incident and didn't elaborate on further. Rowan Voss was also 16. twin to Dex from what felt like a separate universe. Quiet in a way that was not emptiness but depth, a very private interior that he had learned early to protect. He carried a leather journal everywhere, old, worn, the spine from years of use. On the corner, embossed in gold that it faded to almost nothing. EV. Three brothers, Loretta said slowly. All three together. All three. They haven't been separated yet. I've managed to keep them together through all four placements, but this is the end of the line. Loretta looked at the back corner of the living room, at the tarp, at the bucket, at the two empty bedrooms down the hall she had stopped going into years ago. She thought about an $800 savings account. She thought about a mortgage. She thought about a prayer she had been praying for 15 years. Bring them here, Carla. Friday came cold and gray, October winds stripping the last leaves off the sycamore at the end of Birch Street. Carla's county van pulled up at 4 in the afternoon. Not a car, a van. Because there were 3 of them and everything they owned. Everything they owned fit in 3 garbage bags. Loretta stood on the porch for one moment. Then she walked down, off the steps, down the path, out to where the garden met the gate. Because she was not going to make these 3 people come all the way to her door and stand there waiting to be assessed. She was going to meet them in the middle. That was the first difference, the first of many. Callan came through the gate first, tall, shoulders already broad at 17. Face closed in a way that was not sullenness, but armor built piece by piece over 4 years of being the one who couldn't afford to fall apart. His eyes moved across the house, the porch, the tarp on the roof, the garden, and finally Loretta, measuring, calculating what kind of place this was and how long it would last. He had been through 4 of these. He knew the drill. Dex followed. Shorter than his brother, but kinetic in a way that filled space regardless. A compressed energy that looked for release the way water looks for a crack. His eyes went straight to the perimeter. Not the house, the yard, the fence, the neighbor's windows. Exit's assessment Loretta would understand later. Old habit from places where knowing the way out mattered. And behind them both, slightly to the left, was Rowan. Same height as Dex, but built differently. Quieter in the body as well as the manner. He held the leather journal against his chest with both arms, the way you hold something you are not going to let anyone take. His eyes were blue-green, an unusual color, the kind you noticed. And they were looking at Loretta with something that was not yet trust, but was at least attention. She crouched down, not quite eye level, they were too tall for that, but closer than she would have been standing straight. I'm Miss Loretta, she said. This is my house. As long as you're here, it's yours too. Callan's face didn't change. He had heard this before, some version of it at each door for 14 months. The welcome speech, the rules speech, the this is how we do things here speech. He was waiting for the version that came after, the one where the warmth cooled and the rules got enforced and the door eventually opened outward. I've got 3 rules, Loretta said. We eat together, we don't lie to each other, and nobody in this house goes to sleep without knowing they're cared about. Dex squinted. That's 4 things. Loretta didn't miss a beat. The last one's not a rule. It's a promise. Something crossed Callan's face then. Brief, like a candle flame in a window, there and then gone. But there, she saw it. She didn't acknowledge it. Just turned toward the house. Come on inside, I made dinner. That first as they sat around the kitchen table and Loretta understood things she hadn't been told. Baked chicken, rice with butter, green beans from the garden, stewed the way Dottie taught her, cornbread from the cast iron pan, still warm, the edges brown and crisp. Callan and Dex ate the way people eat when they are not sure the food will stay available. Fast, steadily, eyes up at intervals, checking, forks moving without pause, not rudeness, survival pattern. The body doing what it learned to do when meals were uncertain things. Rowan did not eat. He moved food around his plate, reorganized it, did not look up. Loretta watched him for a moment. Then she said quietly, You don't have to talk. You don't have to pretend anything right now. But you do have to eat something. Even just a few bites. He went still. Then he looked up. First time he had made eye contact with an adult in what Carla would later tell her had been several weeks. His blue-green eyes were direct and old for his age, and there was something in them that was not hardness, but something adjacent to it, the particular guardedness of a person who has learned that hope is a liability. Slowly, he picked up his fork, took one bite, just one. Loretta looked down at her own plate before anyone could see what was on her face. Because what was on her face was not a thing for that moment, not yet. These 3 people were still deciding whether this kitchen was safe. She was not going to flood it with her own feelings before they had the chance to breathe. She refilled the cornbread basket instead. Nobody mentioned the tarp in the corner. Nobody mentioned the bucket. Nobody mentioned the way the floorboard by the kitchen threshold creaked when you stepped on the left side of it. But later, when she was washing dishes and thought she was alone, she heard it creak, and she turned around. Rowan was standing in the doorway, journal held at his side now, not against his chest. A small difference. Maybe nothing. Maybe the beginning of something. He didn't say anything. She didn't either. She just turned back to the dishes and left the light on. In the following weeks, the patterns emerged. Callan tested her the way you test load-bearing walls, deliberately, methodically, looking for the point where things gave way. He came home past the time she had asked him to be back. Found a covered plate on the porch railing, still warm from the oven, no note attached. He came home later. Found another plate. She was in the rocking chair when he walked up the path at 11 on a Tuesday, reading under the porch light. "I don't need to know where you were," she said. "You'll tell me eventually. That's one of our rules. But right now you need to eat." He stared at her, waiting for the edge. The condition. The or else. There wasn't one. He sat down on the porch steps. Ate the chicken. Next Tuesday he was home by 9, not because she had demanded it, because he had decided. Those are different things, and the difference matters. Dex's anger was a physical thing. It didn't sit still. 3 calls from Principal DeVries in the first 2 months, fighting in the hallway, fighting at recess, fighting anyone who looked at his brothers at an angle he didn't like. Loretta showed up to every meeting, sat across from DeVries in the plastic chair, and listened to the same speech about unacceptable behavior. At the 3rd meeting, she said, "Has anyone asked this young man why he's fighting? Or do we go straight to consequence every time?" DeVries opened his mouth, closed it. That weekend, Loretta drove Dex to the Millhaven Community Center and signed him up for the youth boxing program with $27 she pulled from the grocery envelope. She sat outside on a plastic chair for 2 hours while he was inside. Did it again. "You weak, want to fight," she told him the first night. "Fine, we're going to do it the right way. Gloves, rules, respect. You learn to control it, or it controls you." Dex didn't say anything, but he went back. Came home tired instead of wounded. Started sleeping through the night. The anger didn't disappear. It was never going to disappear. It was too much a part of him, but it found a shape it could work inside. Rowan stayed quiet for 8 weeks. Loretta did not push. She sat outside his door in the hallway every evening and read aloud, the voice carrying under the door to wherever he was inside the room. She did not ask if he was listening. She could see the light under the door, and sometimes she could hear his pen moving across paper, and that was enough. She read from East of Eden, and then a mystery novel she found at the library's sale, and then a collection of short stories by writers she had never heard of, but whose voices were clean and human and felt like the right thing to put into the air of that hallway. On a Thursday night in December, she was finishing a chapter when she heard him. "Mama Loretta." She stopped breathing for a second. His voice was low, rusty from 8 weeks near silence. "Yeah, baby, will you still be here in the morning?" The house was so quiet she could hear the pines settling in the cold. The faint sound of the tarp against the eave. "I'll be here in the morning," she said. "In the morning after that, and every morning you need me." He didn't say anything else. When she checked the light under his door, 20 minutes later, it was off. He was asleep. The specific sleep of someone who has decided, provisionally cautiously, that a place is safe enough to be unconscious in, which is its own kind of trust. Then January came, and the ice storm. "The worst in 20 years, the radio set said. Power out across 4 counties by midnight, temperature down to 19 degrees and still falling. Inside the house, the windows grew a skin of frost on the interior glass, and the tarp on the roof froze solid, and the ceiling in the back corner, soft since the previous February, began to release. Not drip. Poor Loretta put towels down, moved the buckets, built the boys into blankets on the living room floor. Got the kerosene lamp from under the kitchen sink, one that he kept for exactly this kind of emergency, and lit it. Then Rowan started coughing. Small at first, then deeper, then his whole body involved. She put her hand to his forehead, and it was burning in the specific way that means the body is fighting something it cannot fight alone. No electricity, no working phone. The landline had gone dead with everything else. Her sedan had been sitting in the side yard since November, engine gone, waiting for a repair she had not been able to afford. The nearest neighbor with a working vehicle was Vivian, 3 houses down, a quarter mile, on ice. Loretta did not deliberate. She put on Dottie's heavy wool coat, wrapped her scarf twice, pulled on the garden gloves because they were the thickest ones she had. Colin was in the doorway. "Where are you going?" "To get Vivian's truck. Flat. Decided. You and Deck keep him warm. Pile blankets on him. Don't let him up. Miss Loretta." "Colin." She looked directly at him. "I am coming. I'm back. Watch your brothers." She walked out into it. The world was white and violent. Ice on every surface, the porch rail, the steps, the path, the street. Trees bent under the weight of what had settled on them overnight. The wind was a continuous low sound like something in pain, something that did not stop. She made it 8 steps before the ice took her down the first time. Left knee against something solid under the snow. She registered the impact and got up. Kept walking, fell again near the old sycamore through at the corner. Both hands out this time, scraping through the gloves. Got up, 1 foot, then the next. The quarter mile broken into the smallest possible units. Not the distance, just this step. Then the next one. When she reached Vivian's door, she pounded with both fists until the porch light came on. Vivian opened it and took one look at her face and went for her keys without a word. They made it to Millhaven General. The ER doctor, young, calm in the way that people who chose emergency medicine are calm, because they trained themselves to be, said early-stage hypothermia and a respiratory infection that was heading somewhere much worse. "Another hour in those conditions," he said quietly to Loretta, away from the boys, "and we'd be having a different conversation." She nodded. In the waiting room, she sat between Callan and Dex, all 3 of them still in their coats, all 3 too exhausted for words for a long time. Around 4 in the morning, Callan said it. "Why do you do this?" She turned to him. His face was open in a way she had not seen it before, not in 3 months of living in the same house. The armor was completely off, and underneath it, he was exactly as young as he actually was. 17 years old, asking a real question. "My grandmother used to say, family isn't the people who were there at the beginning." She kept her voice steady. "It's the people who show up in the middle, when things are hard." She looked at him. "I'm showing up. That's all I know how to do." He didn't say anything, but after a moment, so slowly she almost missed it, he leaned. Just slightly, his shoulder against hers. The smallest possible lean, like something finally deciding to stop holding its own weight. She stayed very still, let him lean. After that night, things shifted in a way that was gradual, then all at once. Callan started calling her Mama Loretta, not Miss. The first time it came out quietly, like he was testing the sound of it in the air. Then again, then it was just what she was. Dex stopped checking the windows for exit routes, and Rowan, 3 weeks after the hospital, handed her his empty juice glass one morning and said, "Can I have more?" A complete ordinary sentence, and she refilled and said yes, and neither of them made anything of it, which was exactly right. By spring 2005, Loretta had filed the paperwork for official foster status and begun the longer process, this adoption inquiry. Slow, mountains of forms, background checks, financial reviews that made her stomach tighten, but happening. One Sunday evening in late April, they were on the porch after dinner, the light going gold and low over the garden, Callan shelling peas beside her, hands moving automatically after weeks of practice. Dex in the yard tossing a tennis ball and catching it, completely relaxed in a way that would have been unrecognizable 4 months earlier. Rowan on the porch steps reading from his journal, something he had started doing recently, testing his own words against the open air. "Callan, set down the bowl. Mama Loretta." She looked at him. "Thank you." He said it to the middle distance. "For not giving up on us." She took his hand, felt how much larger it had gotten in these months. "Baby, I could not have given up on you. Not for anything. Not ever." The moment stayed. Neither of them noticed the car at the end of Birch Street. It had been there for 3 days. For 3 days, a limousine, long black windows so dark they gave away nothing, had been parked just past the old sycamore at the far end of the block. Engine off, no one coming or going. Just there, watching. Loretta had mentioned it to Sheriff Purcell after church. He said it'd probably GPS wrong turns. City people. She nodded, did not exactly believe him. On the 4th, she came outside to water the garden and felt it before she saw it. That specific awareness of being observed. She looked toward the sycamore. The car was there, and then the screen door opened behind her. Callan stood on the porch. He had seen Sakar through the window. His face had done something she had not seen it do before. Not the anger or the wariness or the armor. Something older. Something that had been waiting and had just been told its wait was ending. "Callan." She kept her voice steady. "Do you know that car?" He shook his head, but that evening she heard movement in his room, the specific movement of a person making decisions with their hands. She knocked, opened the door. His bag was clothes on the bed and stacked. Dex was in the corner. "We are not doing this again." Dex's voice was flat, final. "I'm not packing. I'm not running. Not this time." His hands stilled on a folded shirt. "You don't know who's in that car. I know who's in this house." Dex looked at his brother, held it. She walked through a January ice storm for Rowan. She showed up to every single meeting with DeVries. She leaves food on the porch when you come home late and doesn't say a word about it. A pause. If something comes for us here, she's not going to open the door and wave us out. Callan looked at the bag, looked at his brother, looked at the window. He did not unpack. But he stopped packing, and that for now was enough. On a Friday morning in early May 2005, the limousine did not stay at the end of the street. It pulled into the driveway. Loretta was in the garden. She heard the engine, heavier than anything Birch Street was accustomed to, the sound of something built for distance and authority. She walked around the side of the house. The limousine sat in her driveway like it had always intended to end up exactly here. The back door opened. A man stepped out, 70 years old, perhaps slightly older, silver hair cut close. A gray suit tailored the way suits are tailored for men who have worn expensive clothes so long that anything else would look like a mistake. Shoes with a polish that had no business being near a dirt driveway in Millhaven, Georgia. He looked at the house, at the tarp on the roof, at the peeling paint on the porch railing, at the garden, at Loretta. His expression did not change, except for the smallest movement at the corner of his mouth. The kind of expression a person makes when something confirms what they already believed. Miss Dawson, that's me. My name's Edmund Voss. He did not offer his hand. I've come for my grandsons. The ground shifted under Loretta's feet. She kept her feet anyway. Your call. Oh, Dex! Rowan, the names like items being checked off. My daughter Nora's children, my blood. I'm taking them home. The screen door creaked behind her. She turned. Callan was there, in the doorway, and on his face was something she had never seen. Not the armor, not the anger, not any of the protective architecture he had built over years. Something stripped down to the bare thing underneath. You, his voice came out fractured. You're the one my father wrote to, after the accident. When we needed, he stopped, started again. You never wrote back. Edmund Voss looked at his oldest grandson for a long moment. That, he said, is a family matter to be discussed privately. Right now we need to address the legal situation. He nodded toward the younger man who had stepped out behind him, briefcase in hand, who had the particular posture of someone employed to be present at difficult moments without flinching. Loretta did not look at the briefcase. She was looking at Callan, at his hands balling into fists, at 19 months of slow and hard-won healing beginning to crack at the edges. At everything she had watched these three people build, the porch dinners, the bronze trophy, the late night, reading through the door, the shoulder lean in the hospital waiting room, pressing against the weight of what was standing in her driveway. She took one step forward, placed herself between Edmund Voss and her front door, quietly, without a speech. Just there, here, the same as she had always been. The court date was set for the second week of June 1905. Loretta hired the only attorney she could reach on her budget, Philip Garrett, 2 years out of law school, office on the second floor of a building on Main Street, top tax preparation service, $80 an hour. He was earnest and prepared and completely outmatched. Edmund Voss brought 5 attorneys from a firm in Atlanta. 5. Loretta brought Pastor Gideon Marsh and Vivian Okafor and the ER doctor from Millhaven General who had treated Rowan in January. She brought written statements from 3 of Dex's teachers about what they had watched change in a boy over 8 months. She brought everything she had. The judge listened to all of it and ruled in Edmund's favor. In Georgia, biological family carried legal weight that a foster parent, even one mid-process on adoption paperwork, even one with 18 months of documented care, could not match without a final order that did not yet exist. Custody transferred immediately. The morning they left was a clear morning, cold but promising warmth later, the kind of early May morning that makes no acknowledgement of what is happening inside it. Loretta stood on the porch. Dex came to her first. Ractus, he didn't say anything. He wrapped his arms around her and held on the way he had never held on to anything in the 18 months she had known him, and his shoulders shook and he did not try to stop them. This boy who had built every available wall against feeling was crying into her shoulder without any attempt at containment. Don't let the anger win, she said into his hair. Remember what I told you. Control it. Don't let it control you. He nodded against her shoulder. Then Callan. He stood in front of her. Taller than her now had been for months. His face all the way open in the way it had been at 4 in the morning in the waiting room. Young and afraid and trying very hard to be neither. Mama Loretta. His voice broke in the middle. We don't want to go. I know, baby. Tell. I did everything I could. She held his gaze, made her voice steady because one of them had to be. The law doesn't see what we are, but I know. And you know, and that doesn't go away. He hugged her, hard, like he was trying to leave an impression. Then Rowan, he walked up last, stood in front of her, and held out the leather journal, both hands. A formal offering. Keep it for me, Mama Loretta. His voice was clear and steady in a way that didn't match the moment until she understood it. He had already decided how this was going to go. He had already made some interior arrangement with the future. "I'll come back for it." She took it, pressed it against her chest with both hands. "I'll keep it safe," she said. "I promise." He looked at her for a moment, those blue-green eyes, direct and certain. "I know you will." Callan turned back at the car door. One last time. "No matter how long," he said. "We're coming back, I swear it." The door closed. The limousine moved down Birch Street, turned at the corner, was gone. Loretta stood at the porch until the sun had crossed the full width of the sky and was starting down the other side. Then she went inside. Placed the journal on the mantel beside Dottie's plaque. The two things together. She made a cup of tea she did not drink. Sat at the kitchen table in the room that still smelled faintly of the people who had eaten in it. She prayed. "Lord, keep my boys safe, keep them well, and if it is your will, let them know I never stopped." She prayed it that night, and every night after. For 19 years, the town talked. Of course it did. This was Millhaven. 2,800 people and roughly 2,800 opinions that circulated through the gas station and the grocery store and the Baptist church on a continuous rotation. The first whisper started the week after the limousine left Birch Street. Loretta heard it at Donnie Pruitt's grocery on a Wednesday afternoon. Not directed at her, never directed at her directly. Just present in the air the way smoke is present before you locate the fire. "Did you hear why that grandfather really came all the way out here?" Must have been something wrong. "Oh, why else would a man like that make that kind of trip?" She probably just wanted the foster checks. You know how that goes. She was in the cereal aisle when she heard that last one. Two women she had known since elementary school. Their voices dropped when they saw her coming. Not all the way. Just enough to signal that they knew what they were saying and were choosing to say it anyway. Lorette put cornflakes in her basket. Walked to the register. Paid. Left. Her hands were shaking by the time she reached the sidewalk. Not from anger, exactly. From the specific exhaustion of being perceived a certain way for so long that absorbing it becomes automatic. Because responding costs something. And she was already spending everything she had on other things. Eugenia Tate was the primary architect of what followed. Eugenia was 70 years old. President of the Millhaven Garden Club since 1989. On the school board since 1998. The kind of woman who had never in her public life said anything she couldn't defend with a reasonable face and a covered dish at the potluck. She didn't traffic in outright accusations. She worked in questions. Meaningful ones, the kind planted carefully at meetings and garden club luncheons in the third pew of Greater Hope Baptist, where the acoustics carried particularly well. I just find it interesting, a wealthy family, coming all that way. There must be more to the story than we know. She's never said what the story was. She didn't need to. People filled in their own versions, and those versions hardened into the accepted one. By spring 2006, the school board announced budget reductions. The cafeteria position at Millhaven Elementary was among those eliminated. Loretta had worked that kitchen for 11 years. She knew every child's name without consulting a list. She knew which kids arrived hungry because the morning at home hadn't included much and needed an extra roll placed on their tray without comment. She had given out approximately 4,000 extra rolls in 11 years, without comment, without expectation. She was the third person to go. Eugenia Tate sat on that school board. Loretta knew, could not prove it, bought a new mop and started cleaning houses. She wrote to Callan and Dex and Rowan every week for the first year. Professional stationery from the Millhaven drugstore, 3 sheets for $1.29. She addressed each letter to Edmund Voss's Atlanta address, the one listed on the court paperwork. She wrote about the garden and the weather and the small, ordinary things of Birch Street that she thought they might want to know were still there. She wrote that she thought about them every day. She wrote that she kept her promises. Every letter came back, returned to sender, red stamp. Block letters, the Postal Service's version of a door closed in your face. She tried calling. The number from the court file was disconnected within 3 months of the ruling. She found another number through directory assistance, also disconnected. She called Edmund's company headquarters once. A woman with a smooth, professional voice put her on hold for 11 minutes and then told her that Miss Dawes did not accept unsolicited personal calls, but she could leave a message. Loretta left a message. She never heard back. In early 2007, she hired Walt Brisby, the only private investigator operating out of Millhaven County. 63 years old, smelling of cigarettes and good intentions, charging a flat fee of $200 that Loretta pulled from the grocery envelope and did not replace for 6 weeks. Walt found the school in 3 days. St. Anselm's Preparatory, Western Virginia in the mountains near the West Virginia border. Tuition $36,000 a year. Now, campus photographs showed stone buildings and manicured grounds, and a student body that dressed like money was not something they had ever needed to think about. Loretta drove to St. Anselm's. 14 hours up the eastern seaboard and into the Virginia mountains, leaving Millhaven before 3 in the morning and arriving in the gray midday of a March Thursday. She stood outside the iron front gate, tall, black finials at the top that were decorative in the way that things are decorative when they are also meant to communicate something definitive about entry. The security guard came out, young, genuinely sorry, looking in the way of a person's asked to do an indecent thing on behalf of someone paying them well. Ma'am, sorry, Mr. Voss's instructions are specific. Your name is on the restricted visitor list. I drove 14 hours. I understand. I'm truly sorry. Loretta stood at that gate for a moment, looking at the stone buildings visible beyond it, the maple trees just beginning to bud in the mountain cold. Somewhere inside those buildings were 3 people who had eaten at her kitchen table every night for 18 months. 3 people who had called her mama. She turned around, got back in the car, drove 14 hours home, stopped once at a truck stop outside Roanoke because her vision had gone blurry and she understood she had been crying without registering it and could not do that on the interstate. She sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, ate a pack of peanut butter crackers from the vending machine because she hadn't eaten since 2 in the morning. Then she drove. Because that was what you did. You drove home. You watered the garden. You made dinner for one. You wrote another letter and put a stamp on it and mailed it not knowing it would come back. And you prayed, and you kept going. This is the part nobody knew, not Loretta, not the boys, not anyone in Millhaven. It would not come to light until years later, in a stack of legal files that Callan read alone in a conference room in Atlanta, and then sat very still with for a long time before he picked up the phone. Edmund Voss Sr. never stopped watching. From the month the boys arrived at St. Anselm's in July 2005, Edmund retained a private investigation firm. Not Walt Brisby with his flat fees and good intentions. A professional firm with staff and systems and weekly reports that arrived at Edmund's office every Monday morning in sealed manila envelopes, which his assistant placed on his desk and which he read before he read anything else. The reports were thorough. August 2005, subject continues to submit written correspondence to Voss's residence, all returned per standing instruction. No direct contact NASDAQ established. November 2005, subjects employed in private residential cleaning. Additionally, courthouse janitorial work on weekends. Financial situation unchanged. February 2006, subject attempted phone contact via company main line. Handled per protocol. No response sent. April 2006, school board position eliminated. Subject now fully dependent on cleaning and janitorial work. March 2007, subject retained local investigator. School location confirmed by investigator within 72 hours. Contact attempt anticipated. March 2007, subject drove to St. Anselm's campus. Turned away at gate per standing instruction. Returned same day. 14-hour drive each direction. Edmund read everyone. He kept them in a file in his private desk drawer, dark green, labeled in his own handwriting, 3 letters, LMD, for Loretta Mae Dawson. He had read the January 2005 supplemental, the one about the ice storm, 3 times before he put it away. A woman walking through 19-degree weather on a January night in Georgia, falling twice, getting up twice, reaching a neighbor's house with bloody gloves to borrow a truck for a sick child who was not legally hers. He read that report on a Monday morning in his Atlanta office with his coffee going cold on the desk beside him. He sat with it for a long time. Why didn't he stop? That is the question Callan would ask later, turning pages, reading dates, doing the arithmetic of 19 years. Why didn't any of it move him enough to act differently? The answer was complicated and ugly and very human, because Edmund Voss Sr. had made a mistake in 1996 that he had spent every year since refusing to name. And the mistake was not the lawsuit, not the custody transfer. Those were consequences. The mistake was a Thursday evening in October of that year when his daughter Nora, 24 years old, the sharpest and most stubborn person he had ever known, the only human being who had ever made him feel like approval was something he needed to earn rather than confer, told him she was marrying Patrick Caldwell, a mechanic from Savannah. Patrick Caldwell, good hands, kind face, a man who had never moved in Edmund's circles, never wanted to, and never pretended otherwise. Edmund said things, the kind of things people say when they are actually frightened and do not have the vocabulary for fear, so they reach for authority instead. The kind of things that close doors. Nora left. took Patrick and their life to Savannah and then to Atlanta and did not come back. Not once in 8 years. Callan was born in 1987, the twins in 1988. Edmund received photographs at Christmas for the first 3 years, and then those stopped, too. He waited for her to come back, because Edmund Voss Sr. had never in his professional life been the first to yield, and he had applied the same principle to his daughter, and his daughter had refused to yield either. And then a delivery truck ran a red light on a wet Tuesday night on I-285, and the question of who would yield first became permanently unanswerable. He found out the next morning. He sat in his offices for 6 hours and did not take any calls, and then he sent the lawyers. Not only because he wanted the boys, though he did want them desperately in the way of a man who has lost the last person who mattered to him and is grasping for what remains, but also because letting them stay in that house in Millhaven with that woman would have required him to acknowledge something he could not yet name. That maybe Dodra had been right. That the kind of home she had chosen, not wealthy, not curated, not built on Edmund's terms, was worth something his money could not replicate. That a woman with a leaking roof and 3 buckets and a garden could give his grandsons things he did not know how to give. He could not say that. So he read the Monday reports and kept the green file in the locked drawer and told himself it was prudence and responsibility and family obligation. And only in the very private hours, alone in the office after the staff had gone home, allowed himself to call it what it actually was. A man too proud to admit he had already lost the argument. The boys grew. They grew in the way young men grow when they are taken from one world and placed in another, by adapting outwardly while preserving something inward that the little will not reach. St. Anselm's Preparatory, tucked into the Virginia mountains, was a place built for a specific kind of person. The kind whose family name appeared on buildings. The kind who had been preparing for prep school since before they could read. Callan Voss, arriving at 18 with a garbage bag's worth of possessions and the posture of someone who had been the adult in the room since age 13, did not fit that mold in any visible way. He adapted anyway. He learned the codes. The way you dress, the way you speak in class, the way you carry yourself in rooms where everyone else has been carrying themselves that way since birth. He learned it the way you learn a foreign language, by immersion and necessity, so with an accent you never quite lose. He studied law because of the courtroom. He would say that plainly years later to anyone who asked. He would say, "I sat in a county courtroom in Georgia in June of 2005 and watched a woman lose to a man with more money, and I decided that would not happen again on my watch." His first-year professor at Georgetown kept that answer on file for 20 years and returned it to him at his doctoral graduation. Dex was refused boxing. Edmund's position was clear and stated once. Combat sports were not appropriate for a young man of the Voss family. Edmund enrolled him instead in tennis, rowing, and equestrian lessons with coaches who charged more per hour than Loretta made in a week. Dex learned all 3. He was naturally athletic in the way that people are naturally athletic when they have been using their body as both weapon and shield since early adolescence. He became competent quickly in all 3 sports and found nothing in any of them that resembled what he had found in the Millhaven Community Center boxing gym. On his 18th birthday, a Saturday in October 2006, Edmund was in London for business. Dex took a bus to a neighborhood gym in Roanoke, walked in, asked the man at the front desk if he could use a heavy bag for an hour. No membership, no appointment, just an hour. The man looked at his hands, looked at his face, nodded. Dex hit that bag for 60 minutes without stopping. Came out with split knuckles and something in his chest that had been compressed for 4 years finally having room to expand. He sat on the gym steps in the October air and breathed, just breathed, the way a person breathes when they have stopped holding something. He went back every Saturday Edmund was traveling. He built his first business at 22, a restaurant in Savannah's historic district. Opened with money he had saved from summer work because Edmund's was Edmund's money, and Dex had decided early that he wanted something of his own. The restaurant made money. He opened another, then a small hotel, then a larger one. Every property he owned without exemption had a gym open to all staff without fees or membership requirements. His operations manager asked him once why he insisted on that particular policy across all properties. "Because someone once paid $27 they didn't have extra to give me access to a boxing gym," Dex said. And it changed everything so. The operations manager wrote it down. Rowan didn't speak to Edmund for the first 2 years at St. Anselm's, not from some anger, not from punishment, from the simple fact that he had nothing to say to this man, and he had learned early that silence was a form of honesty, and he preferred it to its alternatives. He wrote instead. New journals, since Mama Loretta had the old one. Spiral notebooks at first, then proper journal he bought at the St. Anselm's campus store with his monthly allowance. He wrote stories, the same instinct that had driven him to fill pages since he was old enough to hold a pen. Characters who lived in small houses, gardens, kitchens that smelled like something specific and good, women who stayed. Edmund read one of these journals, once, without permission. He told no one he had done so and returned it to Rowan's desk without a mark. That evening, he called his personal physician and asked for a referral to a therapist who worked with adolescents. The therapist met with Rowan twice and then told Edmund privately, "Your grandson doesn't need therapy. He's grieving a home. That's a reasonable response to a real loss." Edmund did not know what to do with that, so he did nothing. Rowan graduated St. Anselm's with the highest GPA in his class and went to Williams College in Massachusetts on an academic scholarship. He majored in English literature and minored in nothing because he did not have the patience for minors. He published his first short story in a literary journal at 21. His thesis advisor Heiser told him at graduation that he was either going to write something important or he was going to spend his life preparing to write something important, and either way she wished him luck. He was 29 when The Woman at the End of Birch Street was published by a small literary press in New York. His editor called it quiet. The kind of quiet that accumulates. The kind that readers carry home and think about for weeks after. It was about a woman, older, black. Alone in a small house in Georgia with a garden she tended like a vow and a wooden plaque on the wall above the fireplace and 3 young men who came to stay for a while and were taken away. The woman in the book waited, kept the garden going, did not stop. Rowan had changed enough details that no one could point to a specific address, a specific name. His publisher assumed it was composite, archetype, something assembled from research and imagination and the particular alchemy of literary fiction. It wasn't. By the second year, it had sold 8 million copies. It was taught in college courses about American literature and the meaning of family and the ethics of belonging. Rowan did not read the academic papers. He was too busy trying to find her. Thanksgiving, 2007. Callan was 20 years old. Home from Georgetown for the holiday weekend, sleeping in his assigned room in Edmund's Atlanta house, a room larger than Loretta's entire second floor, which he had furnished with a desk and a lamp and not much else because he didn't intend to spend more time in it than he had to. He went to Edmund's library late on the Saturday night, looking for a volume of constitutional history he had seen sit on the shelves in September. The library was dim, one lamp on, Edmund elsewhere in the house. Callan moved along the shelves. The desk drawer was open, not fully, 2 inches, enough that the corner of something was visible, dark green. A file folder, 3 letters on the tab. In Edmund's handwriting, LMD Callan stood very still for a moment. He knew those letters. The way you know something without being told, by the specific of a silence, by the texture of what has been carefully not said in a room for 2 years. He pulled the drawer open, took the folder out, opened it, 47 letters, all in the same envelopes. Same return address on each one. 14 Birch Street, Millhaven, Georgia. All stamped, return sent written in red block letters, all unopened. He counted them, stood at the desk and counted everyone. Then he opened the earliest one, October 2005. The handwriting inside was neat and careful, the penmanship of a person who had learned it properly and had been doing it the same way for 40 years. Dear Mr. Voss, my name is Loretta Mae Dawsons. You may know me from the court proceedings this past June. I am writing not to cause difficulty or to make any legal claim. I am writing because I want you to know that I am not your enemy. I am simply a woman who loves 3 young men who lived in my house for 18 months and whom I think about every single day. I am not asking for anything. I am only asking if there is any way possible to know that they are well. You do not have to respond. I understand if you don't, but I wanted you to know that someone in Millhaven, Georgia is thinking about them, praying for them every day without exception. Sincerely, Loretta Mae Dawson. Colin read it twice. Then he picked up the entire folder, carried it downstairs. Edmund was in the sitting room, reading, glasses on, financial documents across the coffee table. He looked up when Callan came in. Callan set the folder on top of the financial documents, said nothing for a moment. Let Edmund look at it. Let him understand what it was. She wrote 47 letters, Callan said. His voice was level, completely level. The voice he had been training for 3 years in law school seminars, learning to keep steady when the material underneath was not. You kept all of them. Didn't open one. Edmund looked at the folder, then at Callan. I'm going to ask you one question, Callan said, and I want an actual answer, not a position, not a management of the situation. An answer. He waited. Why? Edmund looked at the folder for a long time. Colin waited. The clock on the mantel moved through half a minute. Edmund said nothing, because there was no answer he could give that did not cost something he was not prepared to pay that evening. Not yet. Callan picked the folder up, tucked it under his arms. All right, he said. He went upstairs. From that Thanksgiving forward, he came to Edmund's house only when Dex and Rowan would also be present. Edmund's company alone was no longer sufficient reason. Edmund noticed, did not mention it, which was its own kind of response. The years kept moving, whether you were ready or not, whether you had resolved anything or not, just forwards, one season at a time, indifferent to the weight of what was being carried through them. Loretta cleaned houses and offices and whatever she could find. She kept the garden going. She attended Greater Hope Baptist every Sunday and sat in the third pew and brought potato salad to every potluck and stayed to help fold chairs after service because that was who she was regardless of what the town thought of her. She kept the journal on the mantel beside Dottie's plaque, never opened it, had promised she wouldn't. She kept the promise. In 2012, on a Tuesday morning in March, she found a lump. She waited 2 weeks before going to the doctor, not because she didn't know what it likely was, because she knew exactly what it likely was and did not want to hear it confirmed in a room with fluorescent lighting while wearing a paper gown. Breast cancer. Stage 2. Treatable. The oncologist at the county hospital said the word treatable 3 times in the first 5 minutes of the conversation, which told her he was used to delivering this news to people who needed the word repeated before it registered. It registered. She went home, sat in Dottie's kitchen, looked at the plaque above the fireplace for a long time. Then she made a list. The car, the Buick she had replaced the old sedan with in 2009, was worth approximately $3,800. The house had some equity.
Tata's jewelry was in a box in the bedroom closet.
A pearl necklace, 2 rings. A bracelet that had come from someone before Dottie and whose history Loretta did not know completely but whose value she had always understood. She sold the car, $3,800. She took out a second mortgage, $22,000. She sold the jewelry, the pearls, the rings, the bracelet from before Dottie, $1,200. It was enough to begin, not enough for everything, but enough to begin, and beginning was what she had. Vivian Okafor drove her to chemotherapy every Wednesday for 6 months. Did not ask if Loretta was okay, because they both knew the answer to that question shifted hour to hour, and asking it repeatedly would have made it worse. Vivian brought Ginger chews and kept them in the center console of her car because Ginger helped with nausea, and she had looked it up specifically. She drove. She sat in the waiting room. She drove home. She walked Loretta to the door. She did this 26 times, without making Loretta feel like she owed her anything for it. Loretta survived. The cancer did not. The debt remained. $28,000 added to the mortgage on Dottie's house. The years after the cancer were years of mathematics, of calculating the precise minimum at which survival was possible and staying as close to it as she could. She cleaned houses 3 days a week, did courthouse floors on weekends when the contract held, grew as much food as the garden would produce, said no to things she wanted and yes to things she could afford, and prayed every night the same prayer she had been praying since 2005. Lord, keep my boys safe. Keep them well. Let them know. In 2020, the pandemic closed everything. The courthouse contract dissolved overnight. The families whose houses she cleaned stopped answering calls. The economy of Millhaven, which had never been robust, contracted in ways that hit the people at the bottom of it first and hardest. Loretta was 61 years old with no steady income and a mortgage she had been managing at the edge of her capacity. She baked cornbread and sold it from her kitchen window for $5 a pan. She watched the grandchildren of 3 different through a glass door for cash. She was too proud to count in front of anyone. She pulled weeds and trimmed hedges for people on Birch Street who had said things about her over the years she had not forgotten. And she did it without acknowledgement of the history, because pride was a luxury that did not fit in her current budget. Some weeks she brought in $40, some weeks less. She kept the garden going, kept the prayer going, kept the journal on the mantel. Then September 2018 arrived, 18 months before the pandemic, and Edmund Voss had a stroke. Not catastrophic. What the medical team at Emory University Hospital called a minor ischemic event. Enough to admit him for 3 weeks. Enough to leave a slight unevenness in his speech that he addressed with a therapist, mostly successfully, over the following months. Enough to make visible, in the specific way that illness makes things visible, what age and pride had been obscuring. All 3 of them came. Callan took a week from work. Dex flew in from Savantana. Rowan drove down from New York. They rotated days at the hospital the way you rotate a watch when someone needs coverage, not because the doctors required it, but because it was the right thing. And all three of them had been raised, in the 18 months that mattered most, by a woman who did not distinguish between the right thing and the convenient thing. On the second Thursday, Callan's day, Edmund was more alert than he had been since the first morning. The stroke had changed something in his face. Not permanently, not dramatically, but in the way that a shift in posture changes a person. So something that had been held tightly for years had let go slightly. He looked, for the first time in Callan's memory, like a man who was aware of running out of time to say things. He looked at Colin for a long moment. "Loretta," he said. The slight unevenness in his speech was present, but the word was clear, unmistakable. Colin did not move. "Loretta Mae Dawson." Edmund's voice, careful, working. "I was wrong. 3 words, no elaboration. No explanation of what specifically or why or what he wished he had done instead. Just the 3 words stated, and then the silence after them. Callan sat with that. He thought about the 47 letters in the green folder that he had kept in the bottom drawer of his desk at Georgetown, and then at his first apartment, and then at the Atlanta office for 16 years. He thought about a March Thursday in the Virginia mountains, and a gate with iron finials and a security guard who was genuinely sorry. He thought about a woman who had left Millhaven at 3 in the morning and driven 14 hours and stood at a gate and then turned around and driven 14 hours back. He thought about what it costs to do that, to go all that way and still go home and write another letter. "I know," Callan said. He stood up, walked into the hospital corridor, found a plastic chair against the wall and sat in it. The fluorescent lights above him were the same temperature as fluorescent lights everywhere. A cart rattled past. Somewhere down the hall, someone was having a different conversation in a low, urgent voice. And Callan Voss, 31 years old, who had not cried since he was 8 years old on the morning he left Birch Street, sat in a hospital corridor in Atlanta and cried. The way grief comes out when it has been waiting long enough, not quietly, not controlled. All at once, with no warning, like something that has been behind a door that finally opened. He let it, washed his face in the men's room afterward, went back into the room and held his grandfather's hand for the rest of the afternoon. Because that is also what you do. Edmund Voss died on a Thursday morning in April 2020. The world was in the first weeks of a pandemic that had shut down borders and offices and ordinary life. His funeral was 14 people in the garden that Nora had helped plant when she was 9 years old. No church, no reception, just the garden and the April light and the 3 grandsons standing together the way they had always stood together since they were old enough to choose. The will was read in June 2020. $600 million divided equally. And on the last page, in a section titled Additional Bequests, written in ink that was darker and newer than the rest of the document, added, "The Reality confirmed, approximately 8 months before Edmund's death, while he was in speech therapy following the stroke. $500,000 to Loretta Mae Dawson, Fortin Birch Street, Millhaven, Georgia. No conditions, no explanations required. No conditions, no explanation required." Colin read that line twice, folded the page in half, looked out the conference room window at Peachtree Street 14 floors below, at the city moving through its pandemic quiet, at the ordinary indifference of a morning that did not know or care what was written on the page he was holding. Edmund Voss Sr. had received weekly reports about a woman in Georgia for 15 years. Had read about an ice storm and a 14-hour drive in a grocery aisle and a cancer diagnosis and a $5 pan of cornbread. Had kept every letter she wrote in a dark green folder labeled with her initials, and at the end, in the only language he had ever been fully fluent in, he had tried numbers instead of words. Money instead of the sentence he could not make himself say while he was alive to say it. Callan did not know if it was enough. He still doesn't. Some questions don't resolve. You live alongside them. He called a private investigation firm the next morning. The best one he knew, the one his firm used for complex cases involving missing persons and asset location. Find Loretta Mae Dawson, whatever it takes, however long. The investigation took 4 years, which sounds like a long time, which is a long time. But consider the specific obstacle. A woman who had no social media presence, no email address, no digital footprint of any recognizable kind. A woman who had kept her grandmother's landline through 50 years of technological change and had changed nothing about it except the area code once in 2018 when the county updated its numbering system. A single-digit change in an area code that the investigators' database had not captured for 3 years. Dead ends in Atlanta. A false lead in Valdosta, another Loretta Dawson's, 82 years old, pleasant, sold by the call. Letters sent to its Millhaven address that arrived when Loretta was not home and were placed in her junk pile with the coupon circulars and the credit card offers. Near misses. Accumulating. Meanwhile, on Birch Street, November 2023 arrived. The envelope from First Georgia Savings came on a Tuesday. Loretta recognized the logo and left it on the kitchen table for a full day before she opened it. When she did, the language was specific and familiar in the way that bad news becomes familiar when you have been managing near the edge for a long time. 3 months behind on mortgage payments. Total overdue balance, $2,400. 30s to bring the account current or the bank would initiate foreclosure proceedings on the property at 14 Birch Street, Millhaven, Georgia. She put the letter down, looked around the kitchen. The same kitchen where she had made baked chicken for 3 people who ate like they were afraid the food would disappear. Where she had left a glass of hummus milk outside a door every night for weeks. Where she had sat up past midnight with a 17-year-old who was starting to talk about law school and ask questions about applications and financial aid. Her grandmother's kitchen, Dottie's house. Loretta Mae Dawson had 147 in her checking account and 30 days. She picked up a leather journal from the mantel, brought it to the kitchen table, held it in both hands the way she had held it hundreds of times in 19 years, feeling the weight of it, the worn texture of the cover, the corner with the golden initials faded to almost nothing. She had not opened it, not once. She pressed it against her chest. Lord. Her voice was quiet in the empty kitchen. Specific quiet, a person who trained to sing the same listening for 19 years and is running low on everything except the conversation itself. I don't know what to do anymore. I've spent everything I had. I kept going as long as I could. She looked at the plaque above the fireplace. But if I can't see him again, if that's not what's meant to happen, then let them know. Wherever they are, let them know. I kept every promise. I kept this safe. She pressed the journal harder. I never stopped. Not one day. She sat in the kitchen for a long time. The house made its sounds around her. The pine settling. The familiar creak from the fourth board by the bedroom door. The drip from the back corner of the living room where the tarp had never quite been up. Outside, the window was guarded bare for winter. The tomato stakes stood empty in the dark soil, waiting for spring. She had put them away carefully in October the way she always did, because next year they would be needed. She had always assumed next year. Into conference room in Atlanta, 600 miles north and 3 time zones of urgency away, an investigator named Warren was looking at a database entry for the 3rd time that evening, checking the area code had finally, on the 4th year of this search, confirmed. He picked up his phone. Callan answered on the 2nd ring. Mr. Voss. Warren's voice had the particular care of a person who has learned to deliver significant information without projecting what they think the recipient should feel about it. We found her. Callan went very still. She's in Millhaven. Same house on Birch Street. Same landline. The area code changed in 2018. That's what kept throwing the search. A pause. She's there. But Mr. Voss, there's something else you need to know. Tell me. She received a foreclosure notice last month, First Georgia Savings. She has approximately 3 weeks before the bank proceeds. 3 weeks. Callan did not speak for a moment. Then he said, hold on. He called Dex. 1 ring. It's late, Callan. I found Mama Loretta. 8 seconds of silence. Where? Birch Street. Same house. She's going to lose it in 3 weeks if we don't move. Another silence. Shorter. When do we leave? Tonight. I need to make 2 calls first. He called Rowan. Rowan was at his desk in New York, working on the legislative brief for the sibling preservation bill he had been moving through the Georgia State House for the past year. He answered because he always answered when Callan or Dex called, regardless of hour or circumstance. That was as a rule they had made at 17 and 16 and 16 and had kept without ever needing to state it again. Callan said the words, found Mama Loretta. Rowan closed the laptop, stood up, went to the front closet, got his coat. I'm driving down. Rowan, I'll be there by morning. Which house? Same one. 14 Birch Street. Same one. A pause that had something in it Callan could not quite name. Something old. Something that had been held a long time. I'll be there, Rowan said. They drove through the night. Callan and Dex from Atlanta, taking back roads when the interstate felt too slow, talking sometimes and going quiet sometimes, the dark Georgia landscape moving past them in the headlights. Rowan from New York, south on 95, and then cutting west. 14 hours with the radio off, and the specific feeling of moving toward something you have been trying to reach for so long that a part of you stopped believing it was actually still there. But it was. She was. On Birch Street. Same house, still there. 3 days before the foreclosure deadline, Colin called First Georgia Savings and wired the full mortgage balance. Everything, not just the overdue amount, the entire remaining principal from his personal account. The transaction took 4 minutes. Then they kept driving. Dawn was beginning at the edge of the Georgia sky, the particular pink-gray of a March morning in the south, when the three SUVs Callan had arranged from an Atlanta rental company turned onto Birch Street. Moving slow, past the gas station on Route 9, past Greater Hope Baptist with the sign out front, past Donnie Pruitt's grocery store, left on Main, right on Elm, Birch Street, number 14. The white wood frame house with the wraparound porch and the rocking chair painted blue and the garden along the front path and the tarp. Still, 19 years later, still there, on the back corner of the roof. A woman in the garden, 65 years old, gray hair catching the early March light, a watering hose in her left hand, still running, water darcening the soil around the winter bare tomato stakes, her back to the street, still moving through the morning the way she always had before sunrise. Unhurried, like a vow, the SUVs stopped, doors opened, and the tallest man stepped out and stood at the edge of the garden path and waited. Because some moments you do not rush. You let them arrive at their own speed. You've been moving toward them for 19 years. A few more seconds will not change what they are. Loretta heard the engines, different from anything that belonged on Birch Street. She turned around, 3 black vehicles. 3 men stepping out into the March morning. The tallest one, broad shoulders, gray suit, gray at his temples she had not seen before, was standing at the edge of her garden path. She knew him, not from his face, which had changed, not from his body, which had filled out and settled into the specific gravity of a man in his late 30s who had been carrying significant weight for a long time. From the way he stood, the way he held completely still, and looked at her like she was the fixed point, and everything else was the thing that moved. She had seen him stand exactly like that at 17 years old on this same path on a cold October morning, with a garbage bag and a locked pheasant eyes that were already calculating the distance to the nearest exit. Her hand went slack. The watering hose dropped, water spreading darks and silent across the dry March soil. She did not notice, because Dex was there, compact and solid and moving toward her already. No hesitation, no calculation, just moving. And behind him, Rowan, the glasses she didn't remember, the same quiet in the body, those blue-green eyes she had known at 16. Older, all of them older, but present. Here, actually here. Callan crossed the garden path. The same path she had walked down to meet them 19 years ago, rather than standing at the door. He stopped 3 feet away and looked at her with the face that had taken 3 months to open the first time, and which was all the way open now, holding 19 years of distance and searching, and the particular expression of a person who has found something they were not entirely sure still existed. "Mama Loretta," he said. His voice broke in the same place as always broke, and she ran. 65 years old with knees that registered the decision and were overruled immediately. Across the garden path, past the tomato stakes, into the arms that were already coming to meet her. Callan caught her first, then Dex, arms around both of them, then Rowan, his hand on her back, his forehead dropped to her shoulder. 4 people in a winter garden in the early March light, holding on. After 19 years, home. They stood in the garden for a long time. Nobody moved first. Nobody needed to. 4 people in the early March light with the bare tomato stakes around them and the old white house behind them, and the tarp on the roof catching the morning wind the same way it had caught every wind for 19 years. A few neighbors on their porches, watching, not yet understanding what they were seeing. Just that something on Birch Street had shifted. Loretta pressed her face against Callan's shoulder. He was so much taller than she remembered, which she knew 19 years had passed, but knowing and feeling are different countries. She was feeling every inch of the man he had become, the width of his shoulders, the steadiness of him, the way he held on without performance. Just held, because she was there and holding on was the right thing. Dex pulled back enough to look at her face. His eyes were red. He did not appear to care about this at all, which was the most Dex thing she had ever witnessed. Rowan had his hand on her back. When he pulled away, he just looked at her. Those blue-green eyes behind glasses she didn't remember, taking her in the way he had always taken things, completely carefully, like he was reading something and wanted to get every word right. "You're grayer," he said. "Salsasses," she said. "A beat." "Fair," he said, and Loretta laughed, full and real and slightly startled by itself. The kind that requires something to be genuinely okay before it will come. Callan was smiling, that smile. The one that had taken 3 months to see the first time. The one that went all the way to his eyes and meant something specific because it had been earned. She hadn't seen it in 19 years. It was exactly. "Come inside," she said. "I'll make breakfast." The kitchen was the same. All three of them registered it without saying so. The same table, the same chairs, the cast iron pan on the stove, the faded curtains over the sink window, the floor that creaked in the specific places it had always creaked. Rowan stopped in the doorway to the living room, looking at the plaque above the fireplace. A house comes at home when it holds someone else's pain. Dex walked into him from behind. "Move, Rowan." In a second, Callan sat in the chair he had always sat in, the one with the slightly uneven leg, automatically, correctly, the way you return to a language your body learned before your mind knew anything else. "Eggs or pancakes?" Loretta said from the stove. Both, said Dex. "Both it is." Almost funny. Almost. 19 years, and her first instinct was to feed them, and theirs was to sit at her table and let her, which was exactly right. Rowan set the leather journal on the table in front of him, both hands resting beside it without touching it, building up to something. Loretta glanced at it from the stove. "I never opened it," she said. "Not once. Not in 19 years. "I know," Rowan said. "I knew you wouldn't." She turned back to the eggs, cracked them into the cast iron pan, the familiar sound and smell of them. And she had to stop for just a moment with her hand on the handle, because the combination of it, the smells, the sound, the three of them at that table, was almost too much to hold in her chest at once. She kept cooking. When the plates were mostly empty, Callan looked at her. "The house first," he said. "The mortgage. We paid it off 3 days ago, the entire remaining balance. Dottie's house is yours, Mama Loretta. Free and clear. Nobody is taking it." She put her hand flat on the table. "All of it. All of it." "That is, Callan, that is too much." "It is not enough," he said, simply. "Finally. It is not close to enough, and we both know it. But it's where we're starting." Then they told her about the foundation, the Loretta Mae Dawson Foundation, $50 million, emergency housing for foster families, legal aid custody disputes, scholarships for young adults who had aged out of the system, a family resource center to be built right here in Millhaven, and they wanted her to run it. She stared at Callan. "I mop floors," she said. "You raised 3 men who are sitting at your kitchen table right now because you said yes when everyone else said to sit." He leaned forward. "There is nobody more qualified." She looked at the folder Rowan had slid across the table, at the plaque above the fireplace, at the 3 men at her kitchen table. "Lord have mercy," she said. "That's one way to put it," Rowan said, and Loretta laughed again, and Dex laughed, and then Callan. And the kitchen was suddenly loud in the way it had not been loud in 19 years. Dex stood up and started washing dishes without being asked. Loretta watched him at the sink and said nothing. Just felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. Word spread through Millhaven by noon. 3 black SUVs on Birch Street at dawn was not something the town processed quietly. By 3 in the afternoon, close to 800 people had gathered at the town square, a small Woodson stage in front of the old post office. Camera crews from Atlanta station setting up. Loretta didn't know. That was the agreement the 3 of them had made that morning. She thought she was attending a community event. Callan had been carefully vague, and she hadn't pressed because after 19 years, the simple fact of walking anywhere to be serious beside him was sufficient. Vivian Okafor was already there when they arrived, maintaining a composure of impressive difficulty. "You seem tense," Loretta said. "I'm perfectly fine," Vivian said. "You have the face you make when you know something I don't. I have no idea what you mean." Carla Briggs appeared and guided Loretta gently toward the side of the stage, and then Callan was at the microphone. Loretta went still. 800 people went quiet. 19 years ago, Callan said, 3 young men stood on Birch Street with everything they owned in 3 garbage bags. Their parents had died 8 months earlier. 4 foster homes had turned them away. The county had run out of options, and a social worker reached out to this community and asked if anyone would take 3 brothers in. The square held its breath. Nobody said yes. Not one family in this town raised a hand. Something moved through the crowd. The physical response of 800 people absorbing a truth they recognized. Except one woman. He turned and looked directly at Loretta. 800 people followed his gaze. A woman working 2 jobs, $1,280 a month. A leaking roof patched with a tarp and 3 buckets. $780 in her savings account. She said yes, without hesitating, without conditions. He looked back at the crowd. "Her name is Loretta Mae Dawson, and she is our mother." The applause that came was not polite. It built because people were feeling something they hadn't expected to feel. Dex came to the microphone next. "I want to tell you what happened after," he said, "after the court took us away. This town turned on her. Whispers, rumors, she lost her job. She got cancer and went through treatment alone. She has been cleaning houses and selling cornbread for 19 years while this town looked the other way. He paused. We came back to fix that, not because it makes us feel better, because it is right. And because she is the one who taught us those are not the same thing. Rowan stepped to the microphones last. 6 years ago, I published a novel called The Woman at the End of Birch Street. I changed the names. But I want to be clear today in front of everyone, it is her story. This woman's story. The garden, the kitchen, the plaque on the wall, the 3 young men who came to stay and were taken away, the woman who waited. He looked at Loretta. I wrote it because I needed to put her somewhere permanent. Somewhere that couldn't be taken by a court order or silenced by a town that chose a convenient story over the true one. He looked back at the crowd. She taught me that kindness does not keep score. It does not calculate what it deserves. It helps because helping is what it is. A pause. That is what we are going to do here. For this community, all of it, including the parts that have not yet earned it. Eugenia Tate heard that last line clearly. 88 years old, moving with a cane. She stood near the back of the crowd and felt it arrive in her chest with the specific weight of something directed at her without being aimed at her. She started walking, through the crowd that parted for her without knowing why, to the steps of the stage. Up 3 steps slowly, with the deliberateness of someone who has made a decision and will not let difficulty be a reason to stop. She crossed the stage, stopped in front of Loretta, and went down, both knees on the wooden stage. Cane clattered sideways. She didn't reach for it. 800 people watched Loretta. Her voice carried because the square was completely silent. I took your job. I spread stories I knew were not true. I made your life harder in this town for 20 years. She held Loretta's eyes directly. I have no excuse. I only have a question. Her voice cracked. First time in 88 years of a public composure. Can you forgive me? Loretta looked down at this woman, on her knees, on a stage in front of the whole town. She reached down, took both of Eugenia's hands, lifted her up. Eugenia was lighter than expected. Smaller without authority she had worn for decades. Eugenia. Loretta's voice was steady. I forgave you years ago, not because what you did was small. It was not small. It was 20 years of my life. She held the woman's hands, but holding on to it was hurting me, not you. So I put it down a long time ago. She squeezed. You can put yours down too. She pulled Eugenia into her arms. And Eugenia Tate, formidable, composed, unbending for 88 years, held on with both hands. The sound that came from 800 people was not exactly applause. It was something solder. The Loretta Mage at Dawson Family Resource Center opened on a Tuesday in November 2024. 3 stories, brick and glass and natural light. Designed by a local Millhaven architecture firm because Dex had specified that people who knew this town and its bones. A building that belonged here rather than announcing its own importance. Out front, cast in bronze that caught the morning light and turned it warm. A figure of a woman, kneeling, eye level with a younger person standing before her, one hand extended. On the granite base, a house becomes a home when it holds someone else's pain. Dottie Dawson's words, in stone, at the center of Millhaven. The numbers, 1 year out. 31 families had registered to become foster families before the foundation, 0. 45 full college scholarships awarded to young adults who had aged out of the system. 38 homes repaired, including without announcement, 3 homes belonging to people who had been unkind to Loretta. Not as a statement. As a demonstration of the principle the foundation was built on, Callan opened the legal clinic on the 2nd floor. Family law, custody disputes, free or sliding scale. 15 cases in the first 6 months. He had won 13. The $500,000 Zmond had left Loretta in his will went directly, at her insistence, into the clinic's legal aid fund, the old man's apology put to work in the most specific way she could think of. The other 2 cases were ongoing. He would win those too. Dex built the Dawson Athletic Center on the adjacent lot. Boxing ring, basketball courts, after-school programs, free, always free. Because someone once paid $27, they didn't have to give a 16-year-old boy access to a heavy bag. And it changed everything. Rowan was in the Georgia State House 3 days a week pushing the Caldwell-Voss Family Sibling Preservation Act through committee, named for his father and his grandfather. Both men who had gotten things wrong. Both men who had tried in the broken ways available to them at the end. He thought they deserved to have their names on something that tried to do better. On Sundays, they came to Birch Street. Callan, who had bought the house next door and fixed the back bedroom window that had never sealed properly since 2004 and came over every morning for coffee. Dex, who drove up from Savannah most weekends because 4 hours was a reasonable price for Sundays in Millhaven. and who had quietly hired a contractor in July to replace the roof properly. The tarp came down on a Wednesday morning. Loretta stood in the garden and watched it go. Rowan, who had moved from New York to Atlanta, and whose daughter Lottie, 2 years old, named Loretta, with opinions about everything, knew about the animal cracker jar in the bottom cabinet and arrived every Sunday with a singular agenda. The dinner table was loud, arguments about things that didn't matter, stories that started somewhere and ended somewhere else. Lottie's periodic announcements. Vivian next to Loretta every week, surveying the chaos with the expression of a woman who has been proven comprehensively right about something. "I told you not to leave Millhaven," Vivian said, approximately twice a month. "You told me to leave," Loretta said every time. "I was providing options, not instructions. Vivian, I embraced the growth," and Loretta laughed, that full, real, slightly surprised laugh, every Sunday session now, without fail. On a Tuesday in April 2025, the phone rang in the late afternoon. Loretta was in the garden. The calla lilies Callan had planted along the front path in October were fully up, pale and clean against the dark soil. She had stood looking at them the morning they appeared, not yet knowing who had planted them, and had understood before she turned around and saw him on his porch with his coffee. She went inside, picked up the phone. "Loretta, Carla Briggs, retired, but still, somehow, still making calls. Carla, I heard about the center, about everything." The warmth in her voice carried something else underneath, the specific tone of a Tuesday night in October 2004. "I'm so glad. Me too." A pause. Loretta knew this pause, knew the shape and weight of it. "There's a young man," Carla said.
17 years old.
2 placements in 8 months. Not a difficult kid, I want to be clear about that. He is not difficult. He just goes very quiet when he realizes a placement isn't going to last, like he's already preparing for the next one. Loretta looked through the window at the garden. Callan on his porch next door with a stack of files. Dex in the side yard as he passing a problem. Rowan on the porch swing with Lottie asleep against his side, one small hand wrapped around his thumb. The house next door full of people. Her house full of people. Her heart fuller than she had known how to imagine from inside those years when it was just her and the garden and the prayer and the journal on the mantel. "Loretta," Carla said gently, "you don't have to. You've done so much already." Loretta thought about a Tuesday night in October 244. A phone ringing, a covered plate on a porch railing, a glass of milk outside a door, a hand in a hospital waiting room at 4 in the morning. What it means to say yes. Not because you have enough. Not because the math works, but because someone needs someone to stay. And staying is what you know how to do. "Bring him here, Carla." 46 minutes later, a county car pulled up at number 14 Birch Street. Loretta was already at the gate. Not on the porch, not at the top of the steps. At the gate, the same place she had stood 21 years ago. The car door opened. A young man got out, 17. Tall on his way to taller, that loose-limbed build of someone who has grown fast and not quite saddled into it, a duffel bag with a duct-taped strap. She was not quite the right size. His eyes went to the house, then the garden, then carefully to Loretta. He held her gaze for 1 second, then looked away. Old habit. Loretta opened the gate, walked toward him, stopped at the distance that says, "I see you," without saying you have to do anything yet. "Hey," she said, "easy. No performance. I'm Miss Loretta. This is my house. As long as you're here, it's yours." 2, he glanced at her. "I've got 3 rules. We eat together. We don't lie to each other. And nobody in this house goes to sleep without knowing they're cared about." He was quiet a moment. "That's 4 things," he said. Loretta Mace Dawson smiled, that smile. The one that had lived through a leaking roof and 3 garbage bags and an ice storm and a courtroom in 47, returned letters and cancer and 19 years of the same prayer, said into the same quiet house. "The last one's not a rule," she said. He waited. "It's a promise." He looked at her for a long moment, then at the house behind her, the porch with the blue rocking chair, the garden along the path, the front door open with light and voices coming through it. He looked back at Loretta, and something in his face did the thing she had seen faces do before on this exact garden path. Something held very tight for a long time, beginning cautiously to loosen. Not trust yet. The beginning of the question that leads to trust. She extended her hand. He reached out. His hand in hers was large and thin-wristed and slightly cold from the April air. She closed her hand around it, walked him up the path, through the gate, past the calla lilies, up the 3 porch steps, through the front door, into the kitchen. Callan at the stove, who looked over his shoulder and gave a simple nod, one person acknowledging another. Dex coming in from the side door, hand extended. Rowan in the doorway with Lottie on his hip, freshly awake, already scanning for the animal cracker cabinet. She found the young man, studied him with the frank assessment of a 2-year-old. "Hi," she said. He looked at her. Something in his face went briefly soft. Hey, he said. Lottie pointed at the bottom cabinet. By way of introduction, by way of welcome, by way of establishing the most important territorial information about this kitchen. Loretta handed Lottie the jar. Lottie presented it to the young man with the gravity of a significant gift. He looked at the jar, at Lottie, at the kitchen full of people, and he sat down at the table. The chair he chose was the one with the slightly uneven leg. He didn't know yet what that meant. He would learn. Above the fireplace, the plaques said what it had always said. A house becomes a home when it holds someone else's pain. Loretta had read those words tenths and times over 65 years, had dusted the edges until they were smooth, had looked at them the night before a phone rang and changed everything, had pressed them into memory in the years that followed as proof that something worth believing was worth the cost of believing it. She understood them now, not because someone explained them, because she had lived them, and she would keep living them, for as long as there was a table to sit at and a chair to pull out and a plate to set in front of someone who had not yet been told that they were worth the effort, for as long as she was needed, which for Loretta Mae Dawson of Millhaven, Georgia, was every ordinary, necessary, irreplaceable day.